Oh, that.
Got it. Hello, everyone. Nice to see you all. It's been a little bit of time. But let me go ahead and call the meeting to order. This is the Planning Board of the Village of Trumansburg. And this is our rescheduled July meeting. It's was rescheduled until August 4th, 7 o'clock tonight. And so I'm officially calling the meeting to order. And can we do a roll call, please? I'm the chair, Rick Geiger.
Michelle Trani.
John Albert, Joe Kuchar.
Mark DeVocatus.
All right, thank you very much. I don't think we have any minutes to approve, but I will let you know I've talked to Jessica, our new planning board clerk, and she is going to work on with me and others to try to get us up to date on the minutes, which we've kind of fallen behind on. And we have several matters that do need to be dealt with, but I don't believe we have anything at this point. Do we, Jessica?
We do not for today, no. And I will also just point out, Rick, that also present is Code Enforcement Officer Tom Myers and myself as Deputy Clerk and Deputy Treasurer.
Yes, thank you very much. And thanks for reminding me too that I welcome our new deputy clerk. Welcome back. Welcome back. We've missed you.
It's a much quieter capacity there. Not yet.
Right. So anyway, we're delighted to have you with us and look forward to working with you. Okay, we have a couple of things scheduled for tonight. The first is a hearing and a discussion regarding subdivision application. And the second is an introductory discussion of the draft residential zoning revisions that have been put out by the CPZR. So as to the subdivision application, it's for 97 West Main Street. And there are a couple of preliminary items that we should take care of before we open the public hearing. So let me just get us moving on those. First, is the applicant there?
Hello. I'm Eileen Bunce.
Yes. Great. So is there anything you'd like to add by way of sort of introducing this to the board? We have received your application and all the materials appear to be in order. So if there's anything you'd like to, just say to us or say to introduce this, now's a good time to do that.
Okay, yeah, I don't think there's anything I need to add. I'm just wanting to divide my property and sell portion of it.
Okay. That's what it appeared, and that's good. So then the first things we need to do is we have to make a determination of whether this is a minor subdivision or a major subdivision. And to do that, there are some questions that we need to run through, and then we'll have to have a motion on that. So the questions that we have to answer under Article 4 of the subdivision regulations, and these are questions that are, to sort of get an idea of the scope of this project. The first one is, are any new streets needed? And my look at these materials, and Tom, I'll defer to you too. I don't believe any new streets are needed. Number 2 is, are any water and sewer extensions needed? And in the past, what we've understood on this is they mean not connections. They mean like extending the village water lines or extending the village sewer lines. So the answer to that is also no. Are there any conflicts with the comprehensive plan, official map, or the zoning regulations? I'm not aware of any. Tom, do you agree with that?
That is correct.
Okay. And 4 is the proposal a cluster subdivision? It's not. So the answer to that is no. And 5, will the subdivision result in 5 or more lots? And as you can see from the application, that clearly will not be the result. So we've answered all of those, no. And I think we can accept a motion at this point to determine that this is a minor subdivision under Article 4 of the subdivision regulations. Does anyone want to make that motion?
Move.
Okay, moved and seconded, I think Mark and John, good, thank you. Is there any further discussion by the board? Okay, I'm not hearing any further discussion, so all in favor of that determination, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, I think we have unanimously determined that this is a minor subdivision under our subdivision regulations. The second thing we need to do is to evaluate whether we have to do an in-depth environmental evaluation of this. That's the seeker determination. We've got part 1 of the EAF in front of us. And in order to do this, what we have to do is go through these questions on here and see if we have any concerns or additional questions to ask the applicant. And then basically what we have to determine, because it's not actually a listed item 2 or type 2 action under seeker, we have to make a determination if this action will have a significant effect on the environment. And just a reminder here, when we're doing an initial subdivision like this, the action is the drawing of the line. It doesn't involve what's going to happen on the property or anything like that. That's for later on in the regulatory process. So at this point, we're just asking, will the creation of this additional lot have any significant effect on the environment? And we do that by quickly running through the questions here on the short environmental assessment form. So let's, somebody asking something?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I had an application for a different subdivision, and apparently Jess is getting the correct ones.
Okay. So what,
I think we can proceed, but
okay.
unless you guys don't feel comfortable with that. But,
Well, so everybody has, I think, had this now for some time. Are there any questions you need to ask any of us need to ask the applicant about any of the answers that have been given on this? Okay, I'm not hearing any questions for the applicant.
Just one issue, I guess you mentioned that the subdivision is so that you can sell a parcel off later, and of course that has to go through review if and when somebody wants to build on that parcel.
Which I assume would be up to that.
Up to that, yeah, exactly.
So the application will be in the attachment, I just sent it. Would you have a copy?
Okay, so
Thank you. I thought we were all excited I was here. That was nice. I already approved that one, but it's my first notes.
Okay.
That's the in-depth environmental. Yeah, if I can just copy that up.
Sure.
And there's one more on the printer.
Just this is what we're doing now.
Great.
It's the shortcut. There's no mistakes.
okay, so does everybody have the same environmental assessment form in front of them now?
Yes.
Okay, great. You know, I looked over all these questions and I don't have anything further to ask about this. I'm prepared to say that based on the answers that have been given on this 3-page form, that we could make a determination that this will not have a significant effect on the environment. And that would end any further inquiry to satisfy the seeker requirements. So is someone willing to make a motion that we find that there's not going to be any significant environmental impact from this action?
Also move. I'll move it.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, seconded by Michelle. So any further discussion? All right, all in favor of that determination of no significant environmental impact?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so that passes. All right, so we're done with the seeker determination. We've determined that it's a minor subdivision. Those are the sort of formalities that we needed to do before we get to the opening of the public hearing on this. And so now I'd like to ask for a motion to open the public hearing on the subdivision application for 97 West Main Street.
I'll move to open discussion.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. There won't be any discussion of that, but all in favor? Aye. Okay, so the public hearing portion of this meeting is now officially open. Are there any members of the public who would like to add to the information that we've already received from the applicant? I don't believe we've received anything in writing. Is that correct, Tom and Jessica?
To the best of my knowledge, Jess is getting some copies, so she should be back momentarily.
Okay. Well, are there any members of the public present who would like to address the subdivision application?
Well, they could be on the
Oh, that's true.
zoomed in.
What if they use like the chat function?
Yes.
So is there anyone there? I can't see the room very well.
I'll
No.
take a look.
And I don't believe there's anybody online either. Based on what I can see.
Yes, just have the three of you, Rick, Mark.
Okay.
Ben
So,
Dark, I assume he's coming back with the next part of this.
What was that, Mark?
Oh, I just said Ben Darfler was here earlier, but I assume he's coming back for the second part of this meeting.
Yeah, I think when we talk about CPZR, he'll be back.
well, that could be very soon. Well, I'll tell you what, just in case there is someone out there who wants to, no, I'm not going to do that. You know what, this has been properly noticed and everybody's had a chance. And we don't appear to have any members of the public who have anything additional to offer. We haven't received anything in writing. So based on that, I'm going to ask if there's a motion that we close the public hearing.
I'll move to close.
I'll
Second.
second.
Okay, there's a second. Any discussion of that? Okay, since there's no discussion, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. All right, so the public hearing has been opened and closed. And we're now in a position to discuss whether to grant the application as submitted to the planning board. Does anyone have anything else that they'd like to talk about in connection with the application? Well, we have the applicant there, we have the code enforcement officer, so now's the time.
I assume that with the drawing of the line, everything is with those structures that are around 10 feet around, it's all tight as far as our code goes.
Yeah, all the setbacks, required setbacks are met.
And that's all. Does that all get ground truthed by someone, or is that all just based on the application materials that you receive?
I didn't understand the question.
I think what we have is, we have a revised survey that shows the new line. I don't know if the surveyor's gone out and actually looked at, but there's no setbacks. There would only be setbacks on the existing building, and those are
Right.
all clearly met. Yeah.
Okay.
So I think the next step obviously would be after we approve this or don't approve it. But if we do approve it, would be that to get the materials together with the village professional staff that are necessary to file the revised property descriptions and stuff with the county clerk. But the first step in that is for us to approve the application. So is there any further discussion? All right, would someone like to make a motion to approve the application for a minor subdivision at 97 West Main Street that has been submitted by Eileen Bunce, including all the materials that have been submitted with that? Is there such a motion?
I so move.
Second?
I'll second.
Joe seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Nope. Okay, so the subdivision application has been granted, and as I said, now it'll be up to the professionals to follow up with the necessary materials for the county clerk. All right, so we can move on to the next agenda item, which is a discussion of the CPZR draft residential zoning revisions. We have been asked to submit planning board comments, if we have any as a group, by no later than the end of August. So that gives us this meeting and a meeting that I'm pretty sure is going to happen at the end of August. I think it's August 28th, our regular meeting. And that meeting, there's another subdivision request that we're in the process of getting set up. And so we'll be at least discussing that, but that'll also give us another opportunity to put any final touches on any comments that we might want to submit to the CPZR in connection with the residential zoning revisions. So this is, I mean, I sent out a note, along with the materials from Ben, and I got a comment back from Joe regarding the home businesses and how that might, the implications of that, let's put it that way. And not much else, but that's fine. And tonight, I think we could use this as just sort of a rump session to talk about the things that are on our mind, having reviewed this. I think it's, from my standpoint, it's very clear that a lot of work has already gone into it. Pretty careful thought on the sort of key conceptual things that they're introducing. And clearly consultation too with people who've done this before in other municipalities. And so we're not necessarily reinventing the wheel on some of these concepts. And that I think is great. And I think, clearly, like I said, a lot of hard work's already gone into this. And partly for that reason, I think I was finding that a lot of my comments are more just questions about, some of the implications of things. And so I don't know, do people have the actual ordinance in front of them, with the revisions, or have it available, or how would you, what do people think about how we should go through this?
I have to confess that so much time has passed between the beginning of this project and today that I've kind of lost my way. The one thing that I've heard that got a lot of discussion was on-street parking, and maybe Tom can tell me how that has played out in the
Well,
draft.
out's not quite the right word. We're still working on struggling with it, actually. The ordinance and what practices now are so far apart. It's you can barely see one from the other. But that part of it is still very much in discussion.
So that's not part of the part of the ordinance that we're supposed to be looking at this point.
We spent a lot of time on the dimensional requirements. The care cottage section of it, we basically proposed to eliminate that. The elder care cottage, I can go into that in length if you really want. We talked about accessory dwelling units, allowing them also with manufactured housing outside of the R2 district. So there's quite a bit. I was under the understanding that Ben's going to be here to help with that. I didn't really prep myself. Is that accurate or not?
I can't comment.
Okay. So, there will be some specific questions I can answer and others not, but I'm happy to give all that a try.
Here's a question, is the ordinance group the same as the comprehensive plan group?
Yes, the CP comprehensive plan, CR zoning revision.
Okay.
So we did the comprehensive, well, and it's a few different members, but there's a core that are consistent throughout.
And who are they, if I may ask?
Well, let's see, Ben Darkfleur, me,
Dave Breeden.
Noah Demarest,
Dave Breeden.
Dave Breeden, thank you.
Is Kathy Klemper?
Kathy Klempner,
And then I'm the new guy.
yeah. And Mark.
Well, Tom, while we've got you on the mic, one of the things that I noticed in here is that there's a couple of places where you are being given basically discretion to make a determination. And one of those areas was in the Article 3, Section 301 part of the plan, where this is talking about the permitted uses in residential zoning districts. And just as in the 3 to 4 dwelling units, it's site plan review with in the discretion of the zoning officer. Can you, I mean, are there any sort of constraints on the discretion there, or has anyone sort of talked about how that discretion would be exercised? It just struck me, I couldn't find anything that sort of spelled out. And I know that sometimes, I've worked with you long enough to know that you like to have, sort of some direction as to how you exercise your discretion. And I get that completely. And that's what I'd want too. But I just wondered, what was the discussion that led to that, to the idea that for 3 to 4 dwelling units, the site plan review would be in the discretion of the zoning officer?
That was a while ago, but I'll try to recall it. Mostly that if I see a project of that scope and feel like the impact is going to be quite minimal, then I can suggest there not be a site plan review. I think the committee wanted to allow that sort of leeway, so every thing of that size doesn't necessarily have to go through the entire process. Because, you know, even for really small stuff, just this little simple subdivision, for instance, there's a fair amount to do. So I think there's an idea of streamlining at that point. I enjoy having discretion, but I also really liked, as you said, to have direction on that. So I'm not just making all these decisions unilaterally. Not my style, and I don't think that works well with the village, but there are times where it could be simple enough where it would merit that.
Yeah. Well, it may be that I'm just missing something, and that there is some kind of, laying out of what the parameters might be that could guide you. But I was thinking that one suggestion we could make based on our experience as a planning board, as a group, is that in a case like that, where there's discretion given to professional village staff, that there be some guidelines developed as to that would be appropriate for that kind of a situation. And so that it makes your job a little bit easier in trying to decide, as these cases come before you, sometimes in a very informal way. And it's nice to be able to point at something and say, well, this is more square footage than it's going to require a full site plan review because of the amount of square footage, or something like that. But I don't feel strongly about that, but it did seem to me that I've seen, in fact, in the old zoning ordinance, there was some language about a sort of a streamlined process for site plan review that involved a sort of a threshold level. I think the drafting of that ended up being sort of messed up, so we had to kind of do some creative interpretation around that. But I mean, that's the kind of thing that I kind of had in mind. And I think I've seen the same thing in the site plan review ordinance, for like the city of Ithaca, and how much, where discretion can be exercised, by the planning staff that they have. So that's just one thought that I'll throw out there. We don't have to, make any decisions tonight, but I'm sort of taking notes of what people think, and I'll circulate something, and we can kind of try to work on that as maybe an outline for what we might additionally submit. I will say too, since we're all individual citizens of the village, we'll have the right to make our own personal comments about this as the thing rolls through the process. So we don't necessarily have to come to the conclusion that we have to make comments as a board. We could just say, it looks good to us. We've gone over it carefully. Keep going.
Another elementary question, are we still working with consultant on this?
We still have contact with consultants. Once we finish the comprehensive plan, they said, okay, you guys take it from here. So if we, like when we start getting closer to bringing online, I'm sure we'll have them review it. But as far as attending monthly meetings, no. EDR was really helpful in the comprehensive plan work. A lot of that was not that familiar with the committee.
Rick, I was listening to what you were saying, and your thoughts made sense to me. And Tom, I mean, you've got a lot of experience with this, but let's say someday you weren't in that role.
Well, that's part of why I think guidelines are really important.
So would that be helpful? Like, I think in a lot of cases, when a person has judgment to make a decision, it's helpful to maybe have some guidance, a document that has some things that you're taking into consideration. Do you see the value in what Rick was saying?
Sometimes they're called guardrails. Yes, I like those.
So I will go on record, Rick, is saying that if Tom thinks so too, I like that idea.
I think it's a great idea. It's good exercise for thinking about what would work and what could possibly go wrong.
But are we talking about something that's integral with the ordinance or something that is along with the ordinance?
I would think along with supplement. I'm not familiar with the terminology.
I think it could be drafted to be, you know, a piece of the ordinance, and it would just, you know, it would say something to the effect that, you know, in certain kinds of cases, A, B, C, D, you know, the zoning officer has discretion to decide that a full-blown site plan review isn't required in these particular instances.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I would like to move the discussion kind of back to a more just general thought for a second. And, you know, since we have Tom and Mark, I know, Mark, you just started with the group, but I remember, you know, participating early on in the comp plan when the consultant was there, and we were sticking little notes on the board of what our values were, and they played out in that comp plan. And I know now, you know, Ben's group's trying to just take that comp plan and take this one particular area, the residential zoning, and look at those laws. As I see it, kind of, and I read through that several times, you know, those zoning, the changes are to try to address one element that came through in the comp plan about affordability and the number of people that live in the village, and trying to, and could you guys speak to that? Have you heard, you know, have you had just a philosophical discussion about how these laws are translated from the values that were in the comp plan, and kind of what the goals were, what the working goals were, if I'm phrasing the question right?
So some of the working goals were set around making more of the existing properties in the village code compliant. This was a big thing at the start. Some students did a survey using the zoning ordinance versus the dimensional requirements and what the dimensional realities were in the village. And so each parcel has to have 15,000 square feet minimum, 50-foot setback, 15 side yards, 35 rear yards. And there's a little different for accessory structures, but the survey showed that 85% of the properties in the village were not compliant for one of the dimensional requirements, if not all of them. Take Wood Street, for instance. Some of them have the proper rear yard setback, but front yard, no. Sides usually not. And the discussion was, should we have an ordinance that makes that many of the properties not compliant? Existing properties. Do you have to, when somebody wants to build, do they build to this ordinance? And it'd be so different than what's in a lot of the communities, a lot of part of the community, excuse me. And we decided
that's the real important point, is that the idea is not that there are a bunch of non-compliant properties, because when they were built, they were compliant. But the idea is you don't want to have an ordinance then that requires for new construction people to build something that's completely out of character with everything around it. And so it makes perfect sense to try to allow it some adaptation to allow for people to build something new that fits in with the things that are around them. And that certainly makes sense.
And the 2012 ordinance does have some allowances. If you have a property you want to build on, and the houses around it don't match the setbacks, then you can take one to the left, one to the right, average it out, and okay, that'll be your dimensional requirements. But that also gets pretty convoluted. So I appreciate the spirit that has gone at. Back to the committee.
I would be willing to bet that the main culprit is the front yard setback. That the ordinance calls for 15 feet, and there are very few houses.
Well, you know, down South Street, there's some, certainly Larchmont and Tamarack. But yeah, it's a village, it's not suburbs.
Yeah. I didn't mean to interrupt.
On the committee, there are a couple of folks that are real smart growth advocates. I don't know how much you all know about the smart growth movement, but they are pushing, it's a national movement. Smaller houses, smaller lot sizes, make communities more walkable, less reliance on vehicles. So there's stuff about having a minimum amount of parking spaces, you know, given how many units. We're trying to get away from the word family because that makes assumptions about, you know, people living together. The lot sizes, there's a minimum structure of dwelling size in the ordinance now of 850 square feet, which is small. But those folks that like to have tiny houses can go down to 350 and still be compliant within the building code. So, and a lot of that we're referring back to the building code as opposed to making our rule that might be same or similar to the building code. Because, you know, I like to keep that simple. If I can go to one source to get a to refer to get my information, I'll take one source over three that I have to look at and decide, well, which one. The building code always trumps the village ordinance. There's stuff about parking of commercial vehicles in residential districts. And one of the things we're doing is looking at why the ordinance was put in place. So if you have what's considered a commercial vehicle parked in your yard, that's okay, but you can't have two. And what designates a commercial vehicle, you know, is it, well, it probably has to have advertising on the side. But in the ordinance, it doesn't say that. What if one, you know, it says on the property. So what if one's in the garage all the time? What's the problem? Is, you know, obviously we don't want blaring lights and big trucks with flashy signs on them sitting on the side of the street. But that's sort of some of the things we've been going at. And I can talk about general stuff for a while, but it's probably better to have more specific questions.
How far are you in the process? Just out of curiosity, how far along are you in the process?
We've gotten a big chunk of the residential part of the ordinance sent to Guy Crow, the village council, and the trustees, and you folks, right? You got some of it? No? Huh? Yeah, part of the
Yeah.
ordinance that we've been.
Well, we
Yes.
got the draft and we
Yeah.
got the entire draft. Ben forwarded it to this group and it's also posted, which I think is fantastic. I
Yeah.
mean, anybody can, I think the group, the working group has been doing a good job of, I don't know how many people are paying attention, but I appreciated Ben and Rick, you know, forwarding it and then I looked and I see it's you can access it through the village website. If you want.
Right.
So, and there's a frequently asked
Oh,
questions.
right here.
So
Great.
it's all good. You know, and Mark, I don't know if you've had any thoughts. I don't.
I don't really, I wasn't a part of any of the stuff that we're viewing right now. All happened before I came on. So I've really only been there for the last, I think, 2 meetings. And we've been getting into some different discussions, actually interestingly, some stuff that falls potentially outside of this document completely that we've become an ad hoc committee to start discussing, but that's for another time. So no, I don't have a lot of insight into the process behind any of this. I've now read it a couple of times too, and I'm still learning.
Yeah, well, I feel like I'm really learning, and so I'm reluctant to say, you know, have strong opinions, but one general thought I had that I'll share is that I recall in the comp plan when I was following that, and that, you know, another value that was really expressed was quiet neighborhoods and the historic nature of the village. And I know that whenever you're working on something like this, you're trying to address these values and you're trying to balance the different competing values. But one of my reactions, just uninformed in general, is that, in reading through that, is that, and you're talking about, you know, if we get into commercial or home businesses or the setbacks and accessory dwelling units and, you know, some of those things risk pushing up against the value of historic nature of the village and quiet streets. That was something that was mentioned by a lot of folks. And so this isn't a specific, but, you know, I guess since Mark's here and you're here, Tom, if I saw Ben, I would just say, from my standpoint, I hope people were all, like, I think it's smart to always be keeping that in the back of your head too. Like, what are these revisions how are they going to affect that then?
Yeah.
And so, and my specific question that I sent to Rick was that I saw there was a new section on home businesses that was drafted. And it had all those things. It can't occur outside the home. It can't have bright light, you know, it can't make noise. And I'm just so uninformed about all this, so new to all this, that but I'm just, for example, could somebody have a business in their home in a residential area that brought a lot of people to the home? Like, they were gonna have karate classes and cooking classes, and, you know, on Tuesday, there was gonna be 10 people driving in to take, and everything was gonna occur inside the house.
Off-street parking is supposed to be provided for folks who visit the home occupations. So that possibly could be a limiting factor, except, you know, we get back to my frustration with the parking situation in the village, where it's not been enforced way before I was code officer, or zoning officer, still isn't enforced. And it's, I wouldn't say out of control, but really the reality and the zoning ordinance are really far away from each other. But ostensibly, your question will be answered by anybody with a home occupation who has customers visiting would have to provide off-street parking.
Well, and isn't there, I'm not finding it here, but I seem to remember that there's quite a bit of specificity laid out in what's permitted as a home occupation. You can only have a limited number of employees. I don't think it's supposed to be able to be a retail kind of situation. I mean, I'm just doing all this from memory because like I said, I'm having trouble finding it on my screen here. But I am right in assuming that, Tom, right, that there are quite a bit of limiting elements. in what is going to be an allowed home occupation. Yeah, and I know that that's been something that you've had to cover, Tom, in the context of what did it used to be called? It wasn't home occupation, it was, what was it?
They're not cottage industries.
No, oh, maybe it is. Yeah, no, home businesses. It's home businesses now, and it used to be home occupations, right? So, and you've run into a fair amount of issues about when is something a home occupation, right?
Yeah.
Is it a home occupation if it's a catering operation where you've got people, or yeah, you've got people coming and can actually pick up food, at the home. And so, I mean, is home businesses, is the idea that will expand what a home occupation can be? Or what's the thinking on that?
That wasn't the goal, just being more specific. The one Rick is referring to is an actual case where somebody had been operating a business out of their home, where they were preparing meals in the house, having friends over who would make a donation and eat the meal in the house. And no, that's a business. This is your business model. They had a very nice website, and it was a cool idea, but it didn't fit with the ordinance at all. And fortunately for me, I was able to speak with folks in the health department on that one. They said, no, you can't fix food in your home kitchen.
Oh, the restaurant.
Yeah, so that put a big damper on that. They still have that capacity, but they prepare the food in
Certified
an approved kitchen, incubator kitchen. And they don't serve food in their house. They just cook the meals in this kitchen, bring them to the house, and either distribute them from there, or people come pick them up, which is well within the requirements of the ordinance.
It looked to me like that a lot of the activities required your involvement or site plan review, but that none was required for the section for the home businesses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm torn on that one. Once again, do we want to add more bureaucracy to it, or do we want to acknowledge that folks are doing it? And as long as you're doing what's within the ordinance, we don't have to go through that. That's one of the things that's still out there.
Well, like it was a home business that was bringing a lot of traffic to the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And there were going to be a lot of cars parked there, for example.
Yeah.
And you needed to have enough parking to accommodate 8 cars.
Well,
There
yeah.
might be a case where you would need your involvement.
Yeah.
And there is no requirement now in the draft for that.
We have an example of the business up on West Main that built a whole parking lot.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah.
I guess, yeah, I guess I would like to see consideration. I mean, that would just be a thought that I would have, but that if somebody were gonna have a home business that was gonna draw a lot of traffic for whatever reason, and the requirement, and I don't know that I saw that in the listing. I don't think I saw anything about parking under home businesses in the draft.
Yeah.
But I did see that there was no site plan review required or anything, and I think that some of those questions, again, with an eye toward quiet streets and the historic nature of the village, is another competing value that was mentioned strongly in the comp plan.
Yeah.
And I would ask that kind of, as we think about these things, we go through all those revisions and we kind of think like try to envision scenarios that would play out in the village. try to imagine in your own vicinity within the village, what that might look like.
Yeah.
And then have that input or have those conversations.
That's a good one to bring up.
I'm just saying, I take everything I'm saying with a grain of salt, because I really know very little about what, but I'm coming at it more just from a general, maybe value philosophical, and just based on, you know, reading the comp plan and thinking about that and being involved early on in that.
Some of the, probably the greatest frequency of complaints I get are about noise. And the noise ordinance has a really, really low bar. You can't make noise, a lot of construction noise before 7 a.m. weekdays, and it's a little later on weekends, I don't recall what it is. And then after 7 p.m. or 8, it's quite late. And 70 decibels from 90 feet from the property line. And 70 decibels is quite loud. So you can say, okay, that should be cut back, but if there's a band playing at Union Street for the some party for the village, you're going to have decibel levels that are not over that, but they'll be near that. And we got a few complaints about that. I don't know if you've heard it.
Well, a lot of it comes down to interpretation too, because the zoning ordinance states that new construction needs to be in character with surrounding properties. Well, who interprets that?
Yeah, that's sort of.
Yeah.
And we don't have, we had a discussion about having design standards for, to address that. But once again, this is such a diverse housing stock in the village. We talked about having house districts. And you said, okay, well, there's all these exceptions. How can we have, say something should be consistent when it is to begin with? And one of the things that came up with the new construction in the village, it tends to exceed code by a lot. We had that discussion around the stretch code. The houses tend to be nicer. They tend to fit in well with the community. So fewer built. It's, you know, I think it averages one a year new house. And maybe if we have the new dimensional standards, there'll be more building going on. We have to be more aware of that.
Rick, can I ask a process question?
Sure.
So the CPZR committee will put together more draft zoning revision, like a draft zoning code, and present it to the planning board for final official feedback and incorporate that? Is there a process to, or is that what's happening right now?
You know, I'm not exactly sure what the next step is for the CPZR, because they've only really touched on the residential. I mean, where they've really focused is on the residential parts of this, and they're now moving on to some of the other stuff, including they're going to look at, you know, the sort of administrative side of how this stuff actually happens in a process kind of way. So I think at this point, they're just sort of gathering reactions to some of these bigger conceptual issues. And I mean, I like the way you're talking about it, Joe, because I think that's what they're interested in at this point. It's not like, you know, the minutia. It's more, okay, we want all these things. And how can we make them all fit together in a way that allows us to still feel like our values are being honored? You know, so I think it's right to raise these kinds of things. I think what they're looking for from us at this point is comments on the residential, the stuff on that affects the residential district. And the big things there, I think, are the dimensional requirements that are have been, you know, changed quite a bit. The home business stuff and how that integrates, although there's going to be more of that too with as I get into other parts of the ordinance. But that's a big one. And then I think the last big one is the accessory dwelling unit stuff, because it's pretty clear that they are substantially, or the draft is looking at substantially liberalizing the ability to build accessory dwelling units. And not that there aren't a lot of them already in the village, because there are. And they were, when they were added, they were okay. But new, I mean, the new provisions that they've got on accessory dwelling unit makes it a lot easier to add those to an existing property without having to meet the normal setback standards and that kind of stuff. So that's another area where I think the planning board could conceivably offer, some guidance, because we do see this, never in a variant sense, because that's kind of, really strict, but where we do see it is in the more kind of organic site plan review requirements. And, so we're a lot of times we're looking at things that aren't, just bright lines, they're fuzzy. And I have a feeling that with the accessory dwelling units, that there's going to be a lot of that going on. And so that would be something that, if you haven't already looked closely at that, I think the planning board could really offer some important insights in that area.
Sorry, what is the mechanism to make sure that all of these comments from the planning board get to the CPZR? Is that as emissaries, Mark and Tom carry that forward? Should they be encouraged as members to be emailing, or should Ben be invited?
Yeah, no, what I think what we should do is, you might have been out of the room when I mentioned this at the beginning.
Probably.
I'm taking notes. Okay, we've got this meeting and we've got another meeting at the end of August that I think we're setting up. And that gives us time to put something together that if we want to, we can submit as a board. It's totally on the side. Individuals can submit things on their own. But what I'll do is I'm taking some notes on this stuff. I'll circulate something in the next week or so. And people can kind of use that maybe as an outline for adding thoughts or, thought bubbles or things like that. And then we'll at our next meeting, we'll talk about those and anything else that people want to talk about. And we'll get that all incorporated very quickly, hopefully in something short, and get it to the CPZR before the end of the month. We will have 3 days, I think, at the end of the month. But I think we should be able, and I think we should feel free, since we've been asked to sort of comment informally and stuff. We should feel free to exchange emails on this, and sort of work as much as we can as a group, and then we'll decide, do we really have something to offer here or not? And I think it's entirely appropriate, if we don't think we have something constructive as a group, that we just say, yeah, keep going, you're doing a good job. And right now we don't have anything much to say. I think when we get to the administrative part, how site plan reviews actually work and the steps you go through and all that, I'm guessing we're going to have a lot of things to say, so.
Another topic we're starting to work on are short-term rentals or Airbnbs. And nationally, it's a very, very contentious issue. In Tompkins County, it's a contentious issue. And in my opinion, it really needs to be addressed sooner as opposed to later. We are just starting to work on it. If you folks have any thoughts or ideas about it, they're always appreciated. Stuff is so far over the map on them, from doing nothing, like we're calling unregulated short-term rentals, just the code billing for them, to major fees or annual fees for having the privilege of that, owner occupied dwelling similar to a B&B.
To be-
Whole round of stuff.
To be clear on that piece, I was sort of alluded to this before. It seems that everybody on the committee was in agreement that this is really something that needs to be legislated by local ordinances and not something that would go into any sort of revised zoning, comprehensive zoning. But I guess our group was tasked with thinking about it just because there's a sort of relationship there with some of the residential zoning stuff. But to be clear, I don't think anybody's planning to put any of that into this final document that we've been discussing tonight.
Has anybody solved it?
But the conversations between Ben and Guy have been interesting to take a look at. It's very complicated.
Yeah, well, Guy is always quite verbose and dense, but it is valuable to plow through his stuff because he has a lot of good insight. Various communities have adopted laws around short-term rentals that, like I say, they go anywhere from quite lenient to incredibly restrictive. Town of It has put some pretty restrictive ones on that.
Very.
Yeah, I take Mark's point, that it's really a lot of what they're doing though is not zoning. It's other kinds of regulation. And so it does make sense that there would be sort of other ordinances that would be put in some context other than the zoning ordinance. So
It seems like the big, my takeaway so far is that everything, it's, you really want to stay away from prescribing a certain number of days or a quota for a certain number of, landowners that can do something, and also kind of keep everything as consistent as possible so that everything is kind of looked at as equal as a ground zero, and then, have specific people who want to do something that falls outside of that, apply for variances or get special exceptions, but to keep it, as simple and sort of broadly affecting anybody who it might affect in the same way as a baseline. That's not a very eloquent explanation, but
no, it's a complex, nuanced area really, and it'll be interesting to see how it works out. So let's see. Michelle, do you have anything you have sort of thought about in this?
Not really. I was just thinking about the Airbnb, like what kinds, if people were staying in an Airbnb, they'd still have to adhere to like noise ordinance or, so that would be something that the owner would have to pass down the amount of people in the property. I can see those and again, that's not really for us to legislate.
Yeah. Well, and it would have it.
I've just been reading and, kind of taking it in, and I don't have any comments
Okay.
yet.
No pressure. I just wanted to make sure that you're included.
Sure, thank you.
How about, I think this has been good. I'd like to ask you all to, really focus on it for the next week or two, and send me any other comments you have and circulate them to everybody. And I'll, in the meantime, work on sort of an outline of our how our suggestions to the CPZR might be framed. And then we can hopefully have something, working document to look at our meeting on the 28th. Does that all make sense to people?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I know you're all busy folks, and I really appreciate you taking the time to, look at these things and to come to the meetings well prepared as you always do. So thank you very much. Is there any new business?
Scheduling the upcoming 62 Seneca Road subdivision.
Which we now
Yes.
all have materials for.
Yes.
Yes, we do have materials for that. And Tom, you cited a couple of areas on that one that you think are worth or gonna maybe require a little more in my environmental review. Is that what you're thinking?
It was in the environmental review, it's just a couple points that. Let's see. What's it, item 4? Check all land uses that occur on, adjoining, and near the proposed action. So that can be pretty broad. And this parcel is real close, if not abutting the mixed-use industrial district. I haven't looked at it that far yet, but that would, and there's no industrial activity there at the point, but there is commercial. And, you know, should those be checked?
Yeah, I think, yeah, that's a good point. You know, that where the boundaries of things are, you know, matter, and they sometimes create situations that we need to think about. So.
One of the issues in it is there is some wetland
Yeah,
on that.
but it's not federal wetland, but I took a look at the federal map a couple of days ago just to be sure when I was reviewing this. And it's not a federal wetland, but it's a wet area. So it should be taken into consideration at least when, well, not for the subdivision, but once again, we're talking
That's
about.
right. That's a really important point. Yeah,
So
we're drawing a line. We're drawing a line.
But if
Yeah.
any proposed building activity goes on there, then that will trigger that stuff. That's-
Correct.
And
Yeah, no, I was just curious because of being familiar with the site.
oh yeah, it's quite wet. I just looked at the map.
It isn't obvious that there's wetland.
No, there's no trees growing there, not mowed,
Okay,
for instance.
well, I don't see any bulrushes or.
Oh, okay.
Alligators.
Alligators.
No gators. Well, you just haven't gone deep enough. They're shy.
Okay, well, I have to rethink that.
All right. Any other old business?
I have an old business question. For
Okay.
moments as far back as, say, 7:10 PM this evening. Did we open the public hearing?
Yes.
You did. I
And
wrote notes
you
for
wrote
you,
the
actually.
time, so 'cause I have many transcripts to go back and listen to, and I was hoping that maybe I wouldn't have to this one. So great, so it was opened, it was moved, seconded, closed, moved, seconded, and were there any comments?
No.
I did also not receive any written comments to the village email. I don't know if you did to planning board email. Did you get
No,
it?
there were none. And
Great.
Tom indicated that he hadn't received any either. So.
Fantastic, thank you.
And I just want to add, if anybody has any questions about CPZR activity, well, first talk to Ben, but also I'd be happy to speak with anybody about any of it. One of the things I always try to keep in mind, because I'm tasked with enforcement, is every time we put a new reg on the books, that means it has to be enforced. And it will go to the enforcement officer. So I'm very protective of my time with that kind of thing. If it's something that needs to be enforced, I'm all for it, but we should look hard at it. So, you know, or maybe that would be a good basis for me to get an assistant. But what I'm really trying to illustrate is every time you think about something, it's not that straight line. It keeps going off. There's lots of different angles that needs to be looked at.
And Mark and Tom, are you still meeting, the village website says meeting third Thursday of each month from 6:30 to 8? Is that still happening?
And that's an awesome thing about that committee. These meetings start at 6:30 and they end at 8.
Sweet.
And they're efficient. It's a really great group to work with.
Yes, I believe that is still our schedule, Jessica.
Sorry?
That is still our schedule.
Okay, great, and maybe I can talk to the
What days
deputy
of the
clerk
week?
about updating the website for
Thursday.
past meetings for you.
Third Thursday.
Okay. So I don't think there's any more business. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll move
Excellent.
to adjourn.
Is there a second? John, second. All right, we got it. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, we're officially adjourned. Thank you again. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Have a nice evening.
Okay, we are no longer